why we always have to harken back to nostalgia all the time? If it's not, going back to the 90s of that generation, it's always harkening back to, the golden generation, this, that. Oh, we did it differently back then. Like it was even when you think about, again, I hate bringing this up, but it is quite apt in this situation. But you think about it when there was all the discussion around should we cap Christian Volpato? It was like, we capped Harry Kuehl when he was 17. Doesn't mean it's the same situation. Like, just because we did it then doesn't mean it works now. The shoes don't always fit on the same foot. Like, things are not always the same. You can't directly correlate that. Like, it was the same when they were talking about Chris Economidis in that same vein. Different times, context. So, as you said, Joey, we've got to focus on the now, because you keep looking back in the past, you're going to lose precedent of what's happening today, and then that will help set the future. We're always looking back. Oh, go back to the 80s, Biff, rah, rah, rah. Like, fighting spirit. But that is like 30 years ago now. Like, that's in the past. Like,
did you
forget about
Draymond Green's post-game presser in the NBA Finals? Like, just go and watch that if you haven't seen that, and hear what Draymond Green said.
Like, at the same time, though, if you don't know your history, you're not going to know your future.
Yeah, but there's a difference between knowing your history.
No. But see, this is the point that I'm going to make. There is such a revisionist idea of what has come before us in Australian football. There are so many rose-tinted glasses with respect to how things were back in the day. It's just such a cop-out to compare things how they are now to how they were back in the day, because, like you said, you'll never get them back. Stop trying to, halt the progress of time. Like, that's impossible. You can't do that. So you have to figure out how to make things work now. And that
goes for everything. It's not just
of course. But so, what do humans hate more than change? Nothing. Like, the reality is that looking in the past is a crutch, and it allows them to not look anywhere past the surface level. Because in Australian football right now, we are in the predicament we are in because of that. Like, we can't look past next week. We can't look past, we essentially don't look at the big picture. And these continual, parallels back to the golden generation is just such bullshit. Pardon my language, but it's just a joke. We just have to stop this shit.
I mean, yeah, it's not helpful. Like, the golden generation, fantastic team. Great players involved in the golden generation. It's golden generation.
They were just as reliant on one or two creative players like we are now. What's the
for the benefit of the podcast, Paul's come through saying, to be honest, minus Krustic and Ryan, not one player could lace the boots of many Socceroos past teams.
But the problem is,
saying we're not comparing it in terms of talent necessarily. We're comparing it in terms of this idea of mental resilience and toughness. But there's not some unique golden generation trait.
But even the comparison is besides the point. Even if it was the case that even if Krustic and Ryan couldn't lace up the boots of the Socceroos, if there was nobody, which I'm not saying there is or there isn't, it doesn't matter. They're not going out to play the golden generation against Peru. They're going out and, playing a bunch of South Americans wearing a white kit with a red sash. Not Harry Kuehl, John Aloisi. They're not in competition with the golden generation. They're not in competition with the side that made the 1974 World Cup.
But the reality is, as cynical as this might sound, the get off my lawn commentary says that they are.
But
coming from those precursors. Like, the reality is, and this happens in a lot of sports. Like, people love their own legacies more than they love the game. And that's why when they look at new generations, they always look at it with disdain. Like, you look at, let's say, a player like, all right, you think about it. Stephen Curry, when he was getting unanimous MVP, he was the best player in the league. He was just completely transforming how basketball can be interpreted, yeah? A guy like Oscar Robertson didn't like it because it was completely different to how he played when he was playing, in the NBA at that point. He would, it's just older generations in sport always do their utmost to shit on new generations. That's just how it is because they want to protect their legacies.
I mean, you can go back and you can find the quote from Socrates, the great one, not the Brazilian one, from antiquity, talking about the young generation loving luxury, having bad manners, they're tyrants, all of this sort of stuff, thousands of years ago. Like,
you don't need to read The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Bleep to... Nick, what are your thoughts? You give us a book review, mate?
I'm no comment.
That's and that's the thing. They're not in competition with Golden Gen. Golden Gen aren't in competition with them. We should enjoy the Golden Gen for what they did. And, like you said, Ante, know your history. There are lessons that you can take from the Golden Gen, like you can take from any generation, but it's not just a copy and paste job. And even, it can't be a copy and paste job. If you attempted to copy and paste what produced the Golden Generation these days, there's been reports on this. It would fail horribly because society has changed. And screw it, I'm going into my Sunday content now, but it's changed for the better. Yes, maybe there's not so much jeopardy for players as there was back in the Golden Generation, but by and large, that's a good thing. So these days, a player washing out of an academy can fall back on a high school and university education. Why is that bad? That's a good thing. Just players have education and vocational training, and there's a lot more opportunities available, and there's better working standards, and there's better living standards for players on the way up. That's a good thing. I don't think we shouldn't decry rises in living standards and working conditions. As I put in the chat, we shouldn't fetishize poverty or poor working conditions just on the off chance it produces a few better football players.
Hey, you never know, Joey. We went to 50 basis points yesterday, mate.
All right, before we get into a big short watch from Monday, but footballers are people, and there are far more that won't make it than there are that will. And I think it's a good thing that there's a safety net and they're looked after, and it's incumbent upon present coaches, modern coaches, and future coaches to find new ways to produce great players within that system, rather than wishing for a system that, might make their jobs easier, but it would produce worse outcomes. I'm not accusing any coaches or players of saying this. This is a commentary on just a sort of
I think
vibe.
It is a natural, I guess, inclination to try and go back to what you were doing before, because you seem to be regressing. You seem to be going backwards. So what were we doing before? So that's like a natural human reaction to try and recreate. And, if we had the talent level of the Golden Gen, or the players playing in those leagues now, shall we say, then the national team would probably be in a slightly better spot. I don't think that's totally controversial.
I don't think that
already
is
objecting, but
no, it's not controversial. It's fine, but it's just the people. I guess the people who are now criticizing, such a predicament were the same people who facilitated the means for this.
They also helped make it. They're coaches. They're administrators now.
The same people who are now most vocal in criticizing Australian football's current predicament are arguably the most complicit in creating that environment. You know what? That's ultimately up to the people to see through that bullshit, quite frankly.
Ante giving me plenty to bleep in the edit. Nick, you wanted to jump in? You've been waiting patiently.
No. Just quickly. I mean, Joey, you make a really good point, because there's one thing as well. We've got to humanize these people too, right? There is life after football, and if people have that backup and secondary option, and they want to get an education, they want that, then let them. Things aren't the way they used to be. We're not. If we can't send the player overseas straight away at 17, well, I mean, or we can't, have that same pathway and everything like it used to be in the 90s and the 80s? Well, it's different. I think, like, as well, because we know that careers can be cut very short. It's good to have these backup options. And there's one thing as well is, all right, I want to just to kind of leave it at this point, is the past is the past. Golden Generation did their thing. Let's celebrate it for what it was.
It was fantastic.
It was unbelievable on many levels in terms of getting Australia back into the World Cup. There were a lot of talented individual players, but let's leave it there. Let's focus on the now. Let's focus with what we've got and stop trying to, go, oh, we need exactly the same as what we had back then. Let's just work with what we've got and work with what we can actually do to improve that situation. Because Josh, you mentioned not every situation in terms of going back and like trying to do the same thing again because it worked back then is going to work now. Because as we know, the world can change very quickly. And it has over the last couple of years. Things have changed. People's priorities have changed. Things change quickly. They change on a dime. And if you keep trying to, do the same thing over and over again, well, it's that famous saying. It's insanity. Hoping for the same result. You can't always get the same result. That's why you have reviews. You change things on a dime when it's not working. So that's kind of the main thing that I wanted to, I guess, say on that one. But yeah, look, it is frustrating that we keep having to have this conversation because we shouldn't be talking about passion and desire and that as being the thing and talking about harkening back to the good old days. The good old days are the good old days. That's that. Like now it's 2022. It's a different world. Let's work in this world, in this environment.